back to the Amplified Podcast. My name is Jac Carnett. I am your host for today. We are going through the book of Genesis together, and we have finally arrived at the much anticipated story of Joseph. Now, there are several figures in the Bible that the Bible really takes its time and slows down and kind of gives you their full life story. Really, you could probably count them on one hand that do that, but we get all of Joseph's life story. He is part of, he's like the poster child of a fractured family, someone who has done everything right and yet seemingly keeps getting thrown into horrible circumstances, and yet he maintains his character the whole time. And his brothers, on the other hand, have not had so much calamity around them, and yet they keep making the wrong decisions. And so we get to see the next part of Joseph's story today, and we're going to dive right into the story of Joseph. And so we are coming to you from a particularly hot day here in Oklahoma. It's middle of July, and so it is super hot outside today, and so I'm glad I'm inside recording this podcast. And so up until now, we've seen the story of Abraham, the story of Isaac, and then Jacob, who becomes Israel. He has 12 sons or grandsons, as well, as we'll count here in a minute, and they become the tribes of Israel. Now, Joseph is such a good man that he is actually almost rewarded two tribes. There's no tribe of Joseph. There's the tribe of Ephraim and the tribe of Manasseh, which are his two sons. And so his name kind of lives on through them. But these become the 12 tribes of Israel, and they hate Joseph. I mean, they really hate Joseph. And as time goes on, I think they begin to hate him less. But they hate him enough to plan to kill him. Reuben, the oldest brother, says, no, let's not kill him. Let's throw him down a well instead, secretly thinking he can come back and get him later. And after they throw him down the well, this empty well, probably breaks his ankle or something, Judah says, you know what, instead of killing him, we should just sell him into slavery. That's a great idea. So they sell him off to Egypt, and we talked about last time how even in Egypt, he was doing extremely well, to the point where his master over him, because he served him well, his master literally gave him everything in his charge. Literally, the Bible says the only thing he kept from him was his own wife. All he had to worry about was what to eat. But then, of course, the wife lies and says that Joseph was trying to take advantage of her, when in fact it was the exact opposite that was true. And he is sent to prison. Now, even in prison, Joseph maintains his character and does extremely well. And all of the prisoners in this particular, I'm going to get that word right today, this particular prison are given to him in his charge. And so the warden doesn't have to worry about anything at all because Joseph's there. And so Joseph is being trusted with little time and time again, and is showing that he can not only handle it, but he can maintain his honesty. He can maintain, the gifts that God has given him in the process. And then he's about to be elevated to a crazy height here in these chapters. I think it's in these chapters. And so it's funny. I was talking to a friend of mine about Dante Alighieri wrote in the 1500s, I believe he wrote Dante's Inferno and the Divine Comedy. And hell is split up into like these 13 different levels. And depending on what kind of sin you did most in your life or were most well known for, that's the level of hell that you went to. And it's not really funny. What I'm about to say is kind of funny. And Dante really just put all of the theologians that he didn't like in hell in all these different places. And there's a specific level of hell that he makes for liars. And in this place, he puts a couple different individuals, but one of the individuals he puts in there is Potiphar's wife, that she lied to her husband and lied about Joseph and got him sent to prison. And then to the best of our knowledge, maybe you will see it soon. He's never really made right in his eyes. And so, yeah, as far as we know, he's never like vindicated, and so it's just funny that Dante takes her and puts her in the circle of liars in hell. And man, unless she converted later on because of Joseph, that's probably where she is right now. And that's the reality of life. And so Dante, I don't know why I'm going on this tangent. He specifically makes that level of hell, like the punishment that's there is you have like this like itching disease that covers your body constantly to the point where you just like the itching, like poison ivy or poison sumac to infinity, you just constantly, and it sends you into a frenzy. You can just never get relief. And the people in that circle have that disease. And, it's all, that part of it's fiction. We make up that part. We don't really know what hell is really like, but it's true that, a lying spirit sends chaos and sends people into a frenzy over something that's not true. And so that's the point he was trying to make. And Potiphar's wife, whose name we don't even know, she certainly sent chaos into Joseph's life and into Potiphar's household. And so, don't be a liar. Don't be a liar. So Joseph interprets a dream in prison, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And if you're following along, we are in Genesis 40. We have 11 chapters left of Genesis, and then we're moving on to Exodus, and we'll meet Moses. You can follow along in your Amplified Bible, or you can follow along in your Alabaster Bible. Maybe you got the Genesis one already. You're reading it in NLT. That's great. Those make great gifts. They make great gifts for, I guess, even little kids. They can just, or I should say, younger youth kids. They, just take one Bible anywhere you want to go. Just one book of the Bible. And so follow along with us. We are in Genesis 40, and here we go. Now, sometime later, the cupbearer, the butler for the king, and the baker for the king of Egypt offered their lord, Egypt's king. Oh, sorry, not offered. Offended their lord, Egypt's king. So Pharaoh, and we think it's Sesostris II, was extremely angry with his two officials, and the chief of his cupbearers and the chief of his bakers. He put them in confinement in the house of the captain of the guard in the same prison where Joseph was confined. And so these two gentlemen who are high up in Pharaoh's courts are, they do something dumb. We don't know what they did, but they offended the king, and he sends them to prison. The captain of the guard put Joseph in charge of them. He served them, and they continued to be in custody for some time. Now the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were in confinement in the prison, both dreamed a dream in the same night, each man with his own significant dream, and each dream with its own personal interpretation. And so both these guys are in prison together. They've been there for maybe a little while, could be a number of months, could be just a couple of years. Either way, they both dreamed something in the same night. When Joseph came to them in the morning and looked at them, he saw that they were sad and depressed. You would think that everybody in, Pharaoh's prison would be sad and depressed. So I guess if you're in prison and you look even more sad and depressed than the guys who are depressed because they're in prison, that's got to be a pretty long face. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in confinement with him in his master's house, "Why do you look so downhearted today?" And they said to him, "We have each dreamed distinct dreams, and there's no one to interpret them." So Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Please tell me your dreams." Now, Joseph has to ask what the dreams are. If you want to see something really cool, you should turn to Daniel. And Daniel is able to not only interpret the king's dream, but he's able to tell the king what his dream was without ever hearing what the king said. That's impressive. This is impressive as well, but, Daniel's got a leg up on him. So the chief cupbearer told him his dream to Joseph and said to him, "In my dream, there was a grapevine in front of me." So we've got a grapevine here. There's a grapevine in front of me. That's a grapevine. I'm an artist. In the vine, there were 3 branches, and then as soon as it budded and blossomed, I I'm thinking about these 3 branches at the same time trying to do this. So, okay, got 3 branches coming off. And on the vine were 3 branches. Then as soon as it budded, its blossoms burst open, its clusters produced grapes in rapid succession. So we have grapes coming off of these vines. I've got my grapevine out back here at my house. Immediately it starts producing grapes. Okay. Now Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup. Then I placed the cup into Pharaoh's hand. Then Joseph said to him, this is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches represent 3 days. So 3 days. So day 1, day 2, day 3. Within 3 more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head, present you in public, and restore you to your position. And you will again put Pharaoh's cup into his hand, just as you did when you were his cupbearer. Only think of me when it goes well with you, and please show me kindness in mentioning me to Pharaoh how and get me out of this house. And so he's telling him, you were the butler before. In 3 days, you're going to be restored to being the butler again. But heads up, when you get there, please help me get out of here. Please help me get out of prison. That's what he's saying. It's almost like, listen, I've done this for you. You know I'm a good guy. Get me out of here. Okay. For in fact, when I was stolen from the land of the Hebrews by unlawful force, and even here I've done nothing for which they should have put me in this dungeon. He's telling you, I'm innocent, He's the only innocent man in Shawshank. When the chief baker saw that the interpretation of the dream was good, he said to Joseph, I also dreamed, and in my dream there were 3 cake baskets on my head. I don't really know how to draw a cake basket. I'm not really going to attempt it, but we'll say 3 baskets on top of each other, on top of his head. So this is his head. Okay, 3 cake baskets. And in the top basket, there was all sorts of baked food for the Pharaoh, but the birds of prey were eating these foods out of the basket on my head. So he's got all this food in there, all this food, but he's got, birds that are trying to come in, and they are stealing all of the bread out of the basket on my head. Joseph answered, this is the interpretation of it. The 3 baskets also represent 3 days, day 1, day 2, day 3. Within 3 more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and will hang you on a tree, and you will not so much as be given a burial, but the birds will eat your flesh. Now on the 3rd day, which was the Pharaoh's birthday, he released the 2 men from prison and made a feast for all his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer, the butler, and the head of the chief baker, he presented them in public among his servants. He restored the chief cupbearer to his office, and the cupbearer once again put the cup into Pharaoh's hand, but Pharaoh hanged the chief baker, just as Joseph had interpreted the meaning of his dreams to them. Yet even after all that, the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot all about him. So, no good deed goes unpunished. That's not necessarily true, but it kind of seems true in Joseph's case that even though Joseph did what was right and was right for both interpretations, the butler forgot all about him and left him there in prison. And, imagine you just heard your buddy's interpretation of his dream. You're like, wow, I want to get out of prison too. Maybe I'm getting out of prison. And then he tells you you're going to be hung by the neck until you're dead here in a couple days. That's pretty intense. So, just to talk a little bit about this, the Bible says that in the final days, which is the days that we live in, I will pour out my spirits. This is God speaking. I'll pour out my spirit on all flesh, even on your men and women, your servants and your slaves. I think that's what it says. And on your sons and your daughters. Your young men will see visions, and your old men will dream dreams. So there's a long history of God using dreams to accomplish his purpose. And maybe it's prophetic in the way that these things happen. Maybe it's just God trying to get a message across to you. Maybe it's God trying to bring things up to the surface that maybe we've hidden in our hearts. But dreams do serve a purpose. It doesn't mean that because one dream means something, that every dream that we have means something. You can get in real trouble trying to do that. I don't think that you can really put dreams in a box. If you read through Freudian, it's all kind of tied back to, your sexuality. If you read other people, they would say you're just dealing with trauma. I think that, God created us to dream, and so we do, for all different kinds of purposes. Sometimes it has to do with what we ate last night. Sometimes it has to do with the crisis. And sometimes God's trying to get a point across to us. And, God accomplishes everything by his voice. God spoke the universe into existence. God fulfilled the life of Jesus through the prophecy of the prophets throughout history. And I think that the very fact that Daniel spoke these interpretations, I think it caused them to come to pass. You can kind of take this a little bit farther. I listened to a message by Pastor Bill Johnson at Bethel, and he talks about how everything that God does, he does by his voice. And I can definitely agree with that everything accomplished had some sort of prophetic voice that came before. And God speaks in one of two ways. He either speaks out of his mouth. God declares something himself from heaven, from his throne. God said something, in the beginning, let there be light, and immediately it happens. And then some things I think God speaks to us in our hearts. And in order for it to come to pass, we have to speak it out of our mouths. And we speak the words of God, and that's what causes it to come to pass. And so it's important to not stifle the spirits, to not hold him back. If God's given you a word, to share it. Obviously, we need to judge it by, Scripture, and we need to put it up against the lens of Scripture and the lens of who God is. But man, I think it was vital that Daniel interpreted the dreams for these boys. And so this kind of sets a precedent for Joseph's life, that it was these dreams that helped these boys get out of prison, and it'll be a dream again that helps him get out of prison. And so Joseph is very much a dreamer. We remember that when he was a young man still living in his father's house, he had his two dreams where his brothers and even his mother and father were bowing down to him. Only God could have seen that coming down the pike. And so that's going to happen here soon. I don't know if we'll discuss it today, but we'll discuss it next week. That's coming. And so God used specifically dreams to communicate to Joseph, and he used dreams of the people around him to communicate to him as well and show his power. So let's see a new dream. This is Genesis 41. It says this: now it happened at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing by the Nile. So this could have been 2 years that maybe Joseph's been in prison. We've been talking about Joseph this whole time. It could have been 2 years after the hanging of the baker and the restoration of the butler. Either way, 2 more years in prison has passed. And so God's word does come to pass, but it comes to pass on his timetable, not ours. And it says this: the king with Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing by the Nile, and lo, there came out of the Nile 7 healthy cows. So we'll just say 7 healthy cows. 7 healthy cows. Then behold, 7 healthy cows came sleek and handsome and fat, and they grazed in the reed grass in a marshy pasture. Then behold, 7 other cows came up after them out of the Nile, ugly and gaunt and raw boned, and stood by the fat cows on the bank of the Nile. So we have 7 sickly cows that have now come right after the healthy cows, and they're standing by each other. Then the ugly and gaunt and raw-boned cows ate up the 7 sleek and fat cows, and then Pharaoh woke up. Then he fell asleep and dreamed of a second time, and behold, 7 ears of grain came up on a single stalk, plump and good. So we're seeing almost like the Nile is like the flow of time. Now we're seeing the growth of these stalks represented as the flow of time, and we'll see that here in the interpretation. But now we see the number 7 again, and we're going to see it once more. Then, behold, 7 ears of grain, thin and dried up by the east wind, sprouted after them. The thin ears swallowed up the 7 plump and full ears, and Pharaoh awoke, and it was a dream. Then when morning came, his spirit was troubled and disturbed, and he sent and called for all the magicians and all the wise men in Egypt, and Pharaoh told them his dreams, but no one could interpret them. The enemy is only capable of lies. He's only capable of even just, building on what God has already given. So it makes total sense that the enemy would have no idea what these mean. These magicians have no idea what these mean. Only someone who's connected to God could understand a dream sent by God. And so stay connected to the vine. No one could interpret them to him. Then the chief cupbearer spoke to Pharaoh, saying, I would mention my faults today. 2 years ago, Pharaoh was angry with his servants, and he put me in confinement in the house of the captain of the guard, both me and the chief baker. We dreamed a dream on the same night. He and I, each of us dreamed according to the significance interpretation of his own dream. Now, there was with us in the servant a young man, a Hebrew, servant to the captain of the guard, and we told him, and he interpreted our dreams for us, to each man according to the significance of his own dream. This is Joseph, of course. And just as he interpreted the dreams for us, so it happened. I was restored in my office as the chief cupbearer, and the baker was hanged. Then Pharaoh sent and called for Joseph, and they hurriedly brought him out of the dungeon. When Joseph shaved himself and changed his clothes, making himself presentable, he came to Pharaoh. And so, he looks good now. I don't know what else to say about that. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. And I have heard it said about you that you can understand a dream and interpret it. Joseph answered to Pharaoh, it is not in me to interpret the dream. God, not I, will give Pharaoh a favorable answer through me. So immediately, Pharaoh is trying to attribute this gift to Joseph. So we have the gift of interpretation, and he's trying to give it to Joseph. But Joseph is such an honorable man that he says, no, not me. It's actually the Lord who interprets dreams. And so he's immediately taking this credit and giving it over to the Lord. And I think we should do the same thing today. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, in my dream I was standing on the bank of the Nile. 7 fat, sleek, and handsome cows came up out of the river, and they grazed in the reed grass in the marshy pasture. Lo, 7 other cows came up after them, very ugly and gaunt, just skin and bones. Such emaciated animals I've never seen in all the land of Egypt. And the lean and ugly cows ate up the first 7 fat cows. And when they had devoured them, it could not be detected that they had even eaten them, because they were still as thin and emaciated as before. Then I awoke. But again, I fell asleep and dreamed, and in my second dream, 7 ears of grain, plump and good, growing in a single stalk. Lo, 7 other ears, withered, thin, and scorched by the east wind, sprouted after them. Then the thin ears devoured the 7 good ears. And now I was told this to the magician. That's the end of the dream. Now I told this to the magicians and soothsayers, but there was no one who could explain it to me, because there's no real power in magic. It's just smoke, it's just mirrors, it's just diversion. There's no power that the enemy has that we do not give him, because God has given us the authority, or at least has in the age of grace today. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, the 2 dreams are one and the same, and have shown one interpretation. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years. So let's go ahead and write this down. So we have the 7 good cows, or sprouts, and that equals 7 good years. 7 good years. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years as well. The 2 dreams are one and the same. The 7 thin and 7 ugly cows that came after them are 7 years, and also the 7 thin ears dried up and scorched by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine and hunger. So now we have this. Sorry, I messed up the color. So we have the 7 ugly cows and sprouts that equal 7 bad years. The 7 thin and ugly cows that came up after them are 7 years, and also the 7 thin ears dried up and scorched by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine and hunger. This is the message. Just as I have told Pharaoh, God has shown to Pharaoh what he's about to do. Listen very carefully. 7 years of great abundance will come throughout all the land of Egypt. But afterwards, 7 years of famine and hunger will come, and there will be such a desperate need that all the great abundance of the previous years will be forgotten in the land of Egypt as if it never happened. And the famine and destruction will ravage and destroy the land. So the great abundance will become forgotten in the land because of that subsequent famine, for it will be very severe. That the dream was repeated twice to Pharaoh and in 2 different ways indicates that this matter is fully determined and established by God, and God will bring it to pass very quickly. So you may be even saying that like the 7 good years are starting now. So now let Pharaoh prepare ahead and look for a man discerning and clear-headed and wise, and set him in charge over the land of Egypt as governor under Pharaoh. Let Pharaoh take action to appoint overseers and officials over the land and set aside 1/5 of the produce of the entire land of Egypt in the 7 years of abundance. Let them gather as a tax all of the 1/5 of the food of these good years that are coming, and store up grain under the direction and authority of Pharaoh, and let them guard the food and fortify granaries in the cities. That food shall be put in storage as well as a reserve for the land against the 7 years of famine and hunger, so that the land, which will occur in the land of Egypt, so that the people will not be ravaged during the famine. Now the plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all of his servants. So, God always intended for these boys to end up in Egypt. Exactly why, I don't know. We see Abraham. Let's look at our map here real quick. We can see. So we see Abraham goes down to Egypt. Isaac, I do not believe, goes down to Egypt. Jacob does eventually go down to Egypt. We see Joseph go down to Egypt. And so this family line, it almost seems like they were always on their way to Egypt. Jesus also comes out of Egypt as a young man as well. And for some reason, God wants to use Egypt as like this, I don't know, the refining furnace of the people maybe, or just a way to, take the wealth of the wicked and give it to the just. And so it says in the very next verse, so Pharaoh came to his servants, can we find a man like this who's divine in the spirit of God? So obviously Pharaoh recognized that this man has something that the rest of his magicians don't, that the spirit of God is upon him. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since your God has shown you all that there's no one as discerning and clear-headed and wise as you are. So God is using already the calamity that is going to come upon Egypt to elevate Joseph. God can use all kinds of different things to elevate us, but in this case, he's using the dreams of Pharaoh, the calamity of Egypt, to elevate them. And later on, when we see the Israelites leave Egypt, they're also going to plunder Egypt, and they're going to take, all of the riches of the richest city in the world with them as they go. And so God is now rewarding the faithfulness. He's rewarding the spirits, the goodness that is in Joseph, and he's going to place him at a very high level in Egypt. So you shall have charge over my house, and all my people shall be governed according to your word, and pay respect to you with reverence and submission and obedience. Only in matters of the throne will I be greater than you in Egypt. So he's basically saying, from here on out, because you were able to do this thing that no one else could do, because you were shown to be different, I'm going to put you above everybody. Only in the matters of that the king has to decide will I then decide over you. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I've set you in charge over all the land of Egypt. And what's great is that in this land of Egypt, we can look at a map here real quick. So this Nile Valley that's here, this is like the richest place in the world at the time. And the nicest place in the richest city in the world was Goshen. And that's exactly where God is going to place Joseph and his family. So they've been taken out of this fertile crescent over here, and they've been placed within the richest city in the world. And they're going to be placed in the best place in that richest city in the world. So God can do whatever he wants. He just requires us to be faithful in the process. Then Pharaoh took off his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, dressed him in official vestments and fine linen, and put on him a gold chain around his neck. He had him ride in his second chariot, and runners proclaimed before him, attention, bow the knee, and set him over all the land of Egypt. Moreover, Pharaoh said to Joseph, though I am Pharaoh, yet without your permission shall no man raise his hand to do anything or set his foot to go anywhere in all the land of Egypt. All classes of people shall submit to your authority. So he's saying, listen, I know I'm Pharaoh, but I'm basically giving you the same power. There won't be a single thing that happens in Egypt without you, because he sees that the faithfulness that Joseph has shown. And we see that, Joseph, ever since he was a young age, God has been preparing him for this moment. When Joseph was young, his brothers got upset with him because Joseph was able to be faithful in taking care of his flocks while his brothers lied about taking care of their flocks. And so Joseph has been getting set up for this moment his entire life. He was able to take care of flocks of sheep. He was able to take care of Potiphar's house. He was able to even take care of the prison that he didn't want to be in. Sometimes God will use things to test us to see, are you really going to be able to handle the little that I give you, even if it's the little that you don't want? If so, I'll be able to give you more. Then Pharaoh named him Joseph Zaphanath-Paneah, and he gave him Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, a priest of On, Heliopolis in Egypt, as his wife. And so let's see if we have Heliopolis on this map. It doesn't look like we do. Either way, he's given this very powerful woman as his wife. And Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt to inspect and govern it. Now Joseph had been in Egypt 13 years and was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Now it's very important. Whenever the Bible suddenly kind of just stops to mention how old someone is, that's usually the Bible giving us an indication that this is the most important moment of this person's life. We're going to see the same thing here with Jacob in the next chapter, but the Bible's letting us know that, he was sold off. He was sold off when he was 17 years old. So he's sold at 17. He spends maybe, let's see if we can get this right. Eventually he's 30 years old. He's 30 and he's standing before Pharaoh. We know he spends 2 years in prison, at least. So let's say he's about 27 when he goes to prison. So it's possible that maybe he even spent, these 10 years as a servant in Potiphar's house as a slave. Potiphar's house. He's been sold as a slave, then he was a prisoner, and now he's been placed over all of Egypt. That's pretty amazing. I think that's a transformation that only God can handle. Now, Joseph had been in Egypt 13 years and was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Joseph departed from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt, performing his duties. In the 7 abundant years, the earth produced handfuls for each seed planted. So, for every one seed that's planted, planted were getting like 100-fold return, like 100 little seeds in your hand, maybe even more. And Joseph gathered all the surplus food of the 7 good years in the land of Egypt and stored them in enormous quantities. The food in the city, he stored away in every city the food collected from its own surrounding fields. So we see a 20% tax that's placed on the people. So whatever they grow, 20% is then set aside. But even all the things that they don't eat, so the surplus as well, is all set aside as well. Because soon there's going to come a famine where it's going to be so bad, the Bible tells us, that the 7 good years will be, completely forgotten about, because the 7 bad years are going to be that bad. And it's going to be on the back of Joseph to make sure that all of the extra food that they may need and all the food that they will eat during those 7 bad years is available. And what's cool too, is think about this. If the richest area in the world, the richest city in the world is experiencing an unprecedented famine, one that God had to warn Pharaoh about was coming, it's possible that this whole Fertile Crescent, this whole area, was also experiencing a famine. So not only is God elevating Joseph, but in the 7 years after, when everyone else is hungry, God is then going to consolidate all the wealth of like the known world upon Egypt. That's just me speculating, but God is not only setting Joseph as the highest man in Egypt other than the king himself, but he's also bringing to him all the wealth of the world in this one city, to the point where not only do the people give all of their money, they give all of their livestock in the next chapters as well. Then they give all of their own land, so that the government of Egypt, not saying this is a good thing, I'm huge proponent of private ownership, but all the land is now under Joseph's control. And then the people say, we will give you ourselves as slaves just so we can have another year of grain. So then Joseph owns all of it. So like all the wealth of the world is consolidating on a man who is willing to show for those 13 years that he's still going to remain faithful to God. Man, how much more can God bless us here today? I'm not talking about just financially. I'm talking about if we are able to show ourselves faithful in a short amount of time, relative to our entire lives, how much more can God bless us? How incredibly can God bless us? God's able to consolidate all the wealth of the world on one city and really on one man. And God's able to do incredible things. And so let's read the very end of the chapter. And Joseph gathered all the surplus food of the 7 good years in the land of Egypt and stored them in enormous quantities, the food of the cities. He stored them away in every city, the food collected from its own surrounding fields. Thus Joseph gathered and stored up grain in great abundance like the sand of the sea, till he stopped counting, for it could not be measured. They're saving up so much food that's, they can't even keep track of it all. And so that's what's going to be necessary to basically feed the known world for the next 7 years. Now, 2 sons were born to Joseph in the years of famine, before the years of famine came. Sorry, I know how to read. So let's write down these boys' names. So we have Joseph and his wife, who is the priest's daughter. And they have the daughter of Potiphar, priest of on, bore to him. Joseph named the firstborn Manasseh, which means forgetting. So God is able to bless us to such a degree that however difficult our life was before, the light that overshadows that darkness will be, completely wiped away. And that's what he's saying, causing to forget. For he said, God has made me forget all my trouble and hardship and all the sorrow of the loss of my father's household. So God is able to bless him so much that not even so much that it's kind of just is better, obviously, but God's able to give us enough that we forget how bad things were before. He named the second son Ephraim, which means fruitfulness. Ephraim, which means fruitfulness. For God has caused me to be fruitful and very successful in the land of my suffering. The 7 years of plenty came to an end in the land of Egypt. The 7 years of famine began to come, just as Joseph had said they would. The famine was in all the surrounding lands, but the land of Egypt, there was bread. So as I said before, all the areas probably around the Mediterranean, the known world, is suffering the same famine, and all of the world's people are going to converge on Egypt because they're the only ones that were warned about it. So when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried out to Pharaoh for food, and Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph, do whatever he tells you." So we got ready for this. Go talk to Joseph about it. The famine was spread all over the land. Joseph opened up the storehouses and sold the surplus grain to the Egyptians, and the famine grew severe in the land of Egypt. All the people of all countries came to Egypt to Joseph to buy grain because the famine was so severe on all the known earth. So, like I said, God is able to consolidate then all of the wealth of the world and then just give it to Joseph because he was faithful to him as a slave, faithful to him in his father's house, faithful to him in the prison. God is able to do great and incredible things. And so, if there is a title to this, I suppose that maybe the title is great faithfulness comes great blessing. With great faithfulness comes great blessing. And we see that, abundantly in Joseph's life. And so sometimes we have to be faithful longer than we expect, but God is able to bless us far more than we expect as well. And so in the next chapters, we'll be getting into, catching up with his brothers who obviously are experiencing the famine as well. And they're going to have to come and join Joseph and, buy from him and see the fulfillment of Joseph's dreams as a young man. And so we're excited to have you with us. We will see you next week on the Amplified Podcast.